People with disabilities were the first victims of the Holocaust slaughter. And our next guest is someone who was born with spina bifida, Melissa Ortiz. She serves as the National Center for Public Policy Research as the organization's senior advisor for the Able American Project. She also served as President Trump's commissioner of the Administration on Disabilities. Melissa, we do want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this incredibly important topic.
Of course, Melissa, you have an article that just came out in the Washington Times titled Lost Lessons of the Holocaust. Tell us what it's all about.
Lost Lessons of the Holocaust addresses the almost 300,000 people with disabilities who were murdered as part of the T4 project. It was called Action T4. They were the kind of the guinea pigs, if you will, for lack of a better way to put it, the test subjects for what would ultimately become the final solution. People with disabilities, whether they were World War I veterans, whether they had an intellectual, physical, or developmental disability, were taken from homes where they were being cared for, some from institutional settings and some from their own private residences with their family. And they were told as they were being taken away, we're taking you somewhere that we can take better care of you. And that wasn't the case at all.
Right.
They were put into buses that the windows were blacked out. Carbon monoxide from the engines was piped into the buses, and they died. And then they were cremated. Their families were sent notices every few weeks. Your loved one is this, your loved one is that. Then they would get a notice that said, your loved one has contracted pneumonia or typhoid or whatever, insert something into the blank. And then after that, they would get a box of ashes.
Yeah. In your piece, which I want people to read, you also talk about beating cancer and how you were treated sometimes. Let's go deeper into this. What happened?
Sure. I'd be delighted to. The day that some of the people I care most in D.C. were being held hostage at the United States Capitol, I was getting the diagnosis that I had a very quick moving form of cancer and that they needed to operate immediately. I was also told that my options might be limited because I had a pre-existing condition, spina bifida, also Epstein-Barr virus. I was not about to take that as a final answer, and so I pressed. I'm a self-advocate. My husband calls me a bully at times. And I said, look, you can't tell me that simply because I was born with a disability, I can't have every single treatment that anybody else would get. They backed down immediately and they said, yes, you can have this and that. So first we did the surgery, then we did the chemo. Then when it came time for radiation, they balked again and they said, we're really concerned about this. And I said, well, why are you concerned? Talk to me a little more about that. It turned out that they did not have an accessible table or a lift to put me on the table in the radiation unit. So they were concerned about how I was going to get on the table. I said, well, couldn't we just get people to pick me up
right?
and put me on the table? That seemed pretty no-brainer to me. So that's what we did. And I got to suffer the indignity of leaning, because I don't stand well by myself, but leaning against the table in nothing but a pair of panties while people came in and picked me up and placed me on the table. If they had an accessible table or a lift, that would have given me back a lot of my dignity and a lot of my privacy in those moments.
So we're hearing more about euthanasia these days, right?
Yes.
So are euthanasia advocates today also setting their sights on encouraging people with disabilities to see euthanasia as an option?
Oh, yes, indeed. Every single time, and let me tell you about my personal experience with it. Every single time I had to check into the hospital for a doctor's appointment, for a treatment, even for radiation treatment, I had to go through what's called triage. And they would ask me, at first it was, do you feel safe in your living environment? Do you feel like you're a burden? And so I stopped them cold and I said, please tell me that you're not asking me about my best friend, who's my husband. Are you concerned that I'm experiencing domestic violence? And they said, well, that's part of it. But do you feel like you would like to have a different path in your care plan?
Wow.
And because euthanasia, medical aid in dying, is legal in DC, I fought mightily against it and our team lost, unfortunately. They said, well, that is an option. And I said, don't ever mention that to me again. And my husband said that he was quite concerned for the person that I was talking to, that she might not make it out of the room in one piece.
Well,
But
way to
what
stand
happens
up
to
for
people that aren't
yourself.
self-advocates?
Right. This is insane. So on this Holocaust Remembrance Day, what do you want the nation to know?
What I want the nation to understand is that we are in a battle for the moral soul of of this country. Now, insurance companies are more willing to pay for life-ending drugs in some cases than they are for life-saving treatment. People with disabilities, people who are economically disadvantaged, people who are homeless are being made to feel like burdens. What we need to do is re-embrace our moral compass, reset it to go back to this idea that we are the city on the shining hill, that neighbor cares for neighbor from the moment of their birth until their last natural breath. And we need to learn to care for each other, stop making each other feel like an insignificant burden or a big burden with insignificant purpose, embrace each other and help each other live our best life possible.
Melissa, thank you so much for being brave. We got to go, but before we go, how was it working closely with Donald Trump?
Actually, it was a lot of fun. He's different in different situations, but I can honestly say that I never felt disrespected. He always did the thing that matters the most to me when people are talking to me. He looked me in the eye. And I didn't
Amazing.
have to educate him that he needed to sit down to talk to me. He never
Amazing.
stood over me. He always got on eye level with me if we were having a conversation.
Well, thank you for being an advocate.